Davis.
Okay.
That fermentation program, and that was in the 80s.
Yeah.
Was that developed to basically turn people out for the larger breweries? I mean, back in the 70s, 80s, it was Bud, Miller, Coors, the big breweries like that.
Yeah, it's changed. I think certainly when it first started, that's where the jobs were, So I know when I was going to school there, we were learning how to make an American lager. We talked. There wasn't a lot of discussion about beer styles. It was more about brewing science and what's going on in each step of the process. But when we did do pilot brews, they were American lager-based beers. But I do remember that we had some beers from some of the very early microbreweries in the labs, that we tested and things like that. So we were. Michael Lewis is pretty well respected and pretty well connected, and so a lot of brewers sought him out for advice and such. But yeah, back then and I know it's changed a lot, but back then it was the focus was definitely on American lager brewing and how to do that. Although Michael Lewis, is from Wales, and the textbooks that we used were British brewing textbooks, so we had a little bit of everything.
So you got really good at conversion.
Yeah. Hectoliters to barrels and all that kind of fun stuff.
The larger macro breweries get a little bit of disrespect sometimes from the, I don't know about the craft brewers, but craft beer drinkers a lot. My opinion is that you got to respect the consistency and the quality, and there's definitely stuff you can take from that.
Yeah, it's I spent a big part of my life defending what we do, and I got to tell you that the brewers at Budweiser and Miller and at Coors that I know are very intense, very smart, very creative brewers, and there were some people I worked with at Budweiser that had worked in German breweries their whole careers, and then come over to the United States and really had a good handle on the science of brewing, and I learned a ton. When I was at Anheuser-Busch on how to manage a brewery, how to make consistent beer, the kind of things you need to do if you're making beer in multiple locations and you want it all to taste the same. I mean, that's hard to do, and it's especially hard to do with a beer that doesn't have a lot of character, a lot of flavor in it, I mean, you can cover up a lot with hops or with dark malt,
right.
Any inconsistencies, you can kind of blend those away. You can't do that with an American lager. It's just gonna stick out like a sore thumb. Because those beers are not very flavor driven, there's not a lot going on.
Right, you want it easy to
So
drink.
I always understood when people said they don't like the beers. I get that, but the quality that went into brewing those beers was huge. And the big brewers kind of set the quality standards for ingredient suppliers as well. Malt suppliers, hop suppliers, so they have sets of standards that they have to operate under. That a lot of those standards came from the big brewers. That this is how we want you to do it.
So that's helped the craft beer industry.
It's helped everybody, yeah. So don't talk to me about marketing practices and things like that. But, but from the brewing side, I always felt like we were doing some pretty quality beer. I mean, it wasn't the way we approached it was all about the quality.
Right.
Is probably the best way to put it.
Help standardize the quality control.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you just diving into what kind of things cause little minute flavor differences, with the fermentation. Big focus when I was there was trying to understand fermentation. What are the yeast really doing? What kind of things impact them? The flavors the yeast produce, how quickly the yeast settle out, after the fermentation is complete, how to maintain the health of the yeast. And there was a lot of work being done on that. So.
Then the flip side of that, what do you think the larger breweries have learned from the craft beer industry?
That's a good question. I don't know if they've really learned anything because I don't think they, and I'm not talking about the brewers and the people that work for the breweries, but just in general, the way that, the really high level management at those breweries. I remember just reading just a year or two of fad. It's been around for 30 years. It's not a fad. It's been around for 30 years. It's not a fad,
No.
And, so I don't think they have a real grasp on what it's all about. I really don't. And that comes from my experience there, trying to do new products and trying to sell new beers. It just didn't work. And, regardless of how good the beer was, people did not want to buy it. And, things got heavy marketing focus, and it's just not the same.
Anheuser-Busch was doing the born on dating, and they started pushing that. That's what made me think about it, because that was something that the craft brewing industry started marketing more, I think.
Well, it's funny. The big brewers always have code dates on their beers. That was always there. They just never shared them. So it was up to the people that work for the distributors and sales to go into a place and determine whether something was out of code. I mean, they might have a Julian date on them and then assigned a 110-day code date, but you had to do the math,
Right. So that was more of a marketing shift.
Yeah, it really was, because it was all being done. I mean, there was always dates on the bottles and stuff, so crazy.